All right, assalamu alaikum and happy Ramadan. Wish you all the best. Please know that this meeting is recorded and we have started recording already. So I'll start with you with the case study that we've started last lecture. I think we need also, I need you to focus with me. I will repeat it again because we didn't finish it, we didn't complete it yet. We said this case study will cover almost all the principles of classes. So I want your attention. We will create slides. I already shared with you the PDF file, but now while we are implementing, we will create PDF file also to share it with you. I want you to implement this yourself and to make sure that everything is working properly. So I'll start sharing my screen. All right, so okay. Now we have the editor, and I have a blank presentation, and also I will open the file. It's shared with you already. Okay, so this is the case study that we are going to implement, or we already started implementing this. So the first thing, the case study is about students. So let me just try copy and paste and see if it's better to start with or use Word document. No, it's all right. Okay, so in this part, we will take an example and apply all the principles to it to further clarify the class or the idea of the class. The example is the student. Now, the first thing is, we did this before. You need to identify the attributes of the student. So the first part, I will just increase the size. Okay, I think you can see it now. So first, I'll create class student, right? And as you remember, I told you it's not mandatory, but it's preferred to use uppercase or capital letter. I mean, students start with capital letter. All right. Now, the first thing to think about is the attribute, or what attributes does the student have? As we discussed in the previous lecture, we said you can use the name, ID, GPA, specialization, degree, study mode, etc. And you have to select the appropriate types. For example, let's discuss this. I will copy this and see if it works. All right, so no need. So first of all, the ID. In our case, if we are applying this to our college, ID is an integer, all right? But some other colleges, they use letters with IDs, so it's preferred to be string, okay? All right, for simplicity, I'll consider it as integer. Now, and string specialization. It's enough to write SPC. All right. Now I have the attributes. Now, anybody can tell me what type of access what is the type? Is it of access yes modifier? Is it public, private, or protected? Since we didn't write anything here, then by default they are private. Okay. Okay. Then usually for every class, there's a constructor. The constructor should be public. Here I have to write public. Why? Because everything is private unless I write something else here. So here it has to be public. It should have the same name as the class. Okay, and you can do whatever on this, because this will be the first function that will be executed when we define a class. For example, here I will not initialize things like usual. I write only a message, cout. This is the constructor of the class student, right? Okay, now see if I declare a variable here, student, st1, okay, then at the moment I create this object, it will go and search for the class and search for the constructor, and of course execute whatever listed in the constructor. So let's run it and see. All right, don't have errors. Okay, so if you can see here, this is the constructor of the class student, nothing else. But usually we use the constructor to initialize the values. Why? Because these values cannot be accessed from outside. Why? Because they are private. All right. So in this case, I don't want to write this message. What I'll do here is to pass arguments, ID, string name. The difference between this name and this one is the capital letter here. All right, and string here I want to change it to capital letter also. All right, and inside what I'll do here, ID equals ID, name equals name, and specialization equal specialization. All right. So again, the constructor doesn't mean that I have to initialize the values or pass the values. It can be used to do anything while declaring the variable or the object, but sometimes or most of the times we are using it to initialize the value. Now see, I got an error now. Why? Because now I have a constructor. So I have to pass all the arguments here. So I'll put, for example, Aisha. All right. The ID should be first. 1, 2, 3. Then Aisha. Then it asks for another specialization. We will consider it as MIS. Okay. Now, till now, this is the process, or this process called encapsulation. That I encapsulate everything in one variable, which is st1. Now, I want to use st1. Of course, till now, I cannot use it in any way. I cannot access the ID. I cannot access the name. I cannot access the specialization or anything. So it's always it's better to create accessors, or we call them getters and setters, right? Getters, or we called it in our case, we called it mutators and accessors. Now, the idea is to access the variables that I want, and of course, these are private, as I told you. It should be public. Now, to avoid a long process and write more code, I'll just create a method. And usually when I ask you in any question to suggest a method, I think the best method you can suggest is the information or info. So I'll create void info, which prints everything. All right. Here. ID equals. Now it can access ID. Capital ID. And end line. Dot name equals name. And see out specialization equals specialization, also end line. That's it. Now I have this function that I can use. If you want now to see what you can do, just write st1 dot. Now I have only info because it's the only public and accessible method. Let's run it. Okay, so that's what we got from info. ID equal to 3, name Aisha, and specialization is MIS. So now all what we did here is to create the class student, all right, and we suggested and build the constructor, and we suggested some methods, and we suggest only one method, which is the info. Before changing it, I will share it with you. I'll put it in the presentation. All right, so you can access it. And 1 second, let me just reduce the size. All right. What next? This is the first part, is to create the class and to suggest methods. Now let's see what we can do more, or what we have here in. Yeah, this is exactly what we did. Now the methods also, we covered it. We said you have info and the constructor also. Okay. If you can see in the example that I shared with you, first we put the public, the names and the name and ID and all the attributes are as public because we wanted to access them. Now the constructor also, this is the constructor. Okay, we covered all these things. We talked about the encapsulation. We changed this to private, and then string name, specialization, and ID, and we created the constructor here, and we have the info, and we said you can use this, the setters and the getters, or what we call mutators and accessors. All right, so set name, this is a setter to access the name, and string get name to access also the name and read it. Abstraction, this is what we did last time, but I feel like you need more elaboration about it. Now, the idea of abstraction, if you remember, and when we discussed in our classes, is to create a function that all the subclasses should have similar function, but with different functionality, or functions that work differently. All right, not totally differently. We will see that, for example, in shapes, when you select the area, it's almost similar to each other, but the difference is, or the main difference is in the equation to calculate the area in the shapes. So in our student, we will create something we will call honor list. All right, so abstract class honor list. So let me just go there and write the abstraction. We will work on abstraction. All right. So what we have in the abstraction here, I will define or declare here a new class ABS abstract ST student. This is just any name you want to give it. I don't want to make it very long. So class abstract student. That means any or all the subclasses should satisfy the function that, of course, here we are going to define a pure virtual function. So here, if I want to define virtual, okay, on our list, I need to give it a type, all right? Here, void, I think, is better. Now I have I've got an error because I have to define something here. So if you define it like this, it's blank, it does nothing. If you can see here, before making it equal to 0, what does that mean, making a function or a virtual function equals to 0? Let's see. Now, in this case, virtual function, if you define it like this, like here, for example, I will put something cout. List or this is function. All right, and semicolon. Of course, now nothing will happen unless I call this function. But to make it mandatory or to force all the subclasses to define the function, you should make it equal to 0. All right. Now, when I made it equal to 0, I'll get error directly. In the here, a student, okay, inherit from, we call it ABS student. All right. Now, if I execute it, see, I got this error directly. Why? Because here I have to declare the function or to define the function in the class, in the subclass. So here, if you can see, I have to, or I should have a function called here void, okay, and write whatever in this function. Now the error has been removed. Okay, so remember that I made it virtual void analyst equals 0 means any class that inherits from from this class should define this function. All right, and this is what we did here. If you can see, virtual void on our list equals 0 student. Here, of course, this is the regular class. Yeah, see, void honor list. But here I have another thing to decide, which is the GPA, right? So I will add this, or I'll modify this one, and I'll make here. I'll add another attribute, which is double GPA. All right, and here also I will add it here, double GPA, and I will modify the constructor to make it GPA equals GPA. Right, just adding another attribute. Now here in the honor list, I can add, for example, if GPA greater than 80, okay, cout your name will be listed in the honor list. Okay. Anything, but this is enough. Now, here I got an error because I need to add in the constructor. I forgot, or not forgot. I should add the GPA. Okay. Now, if I write st1 dot honor list, see I got this also, and let's see the execution. Okay. 1, 2, 3, the name, Aisha, the specialization, and your name will be listed in the honor list. Why? Because it's 87. So what if it's not 87? Else, or not greater than 80. It's better to make it greater than or equal. Okay. Your name will not be listed. Good luck. All right. Again, here instead of 87, I'll give, for example, 67, and let's run it and see the result. Okay, this is what we got. ID, name, etc. Your name will not be listed, and good luck. Now, if you can, if you see here, I added a new attribute, so it's better also to put it in the info. Okay. So this is the first part of the abstraction. All right, I'll add it with, I'll copy it and share it with you. Put it in the presentation. All right, don't worry if the text is very small. I'm just sharing with you this so you can copy and paste it in your programs or on the code that you are going to write. Okay, let me just reduce the size once again, or a little bit more. All right, now we are done with the abstraction. Let's see what next. The inheritance. All right, now the inheritance, we will assume that we have two types of students. We have regular students and we have graduating student. Okay, let me just see. Yeah, graduating student. So regular student, what's the difference between them? What's the difference between the regular student and a graduating student? The graduating students, usually we ask them about the remaining hours, how many hours left to graduate. So I'll create now another class. Okay, here I'll call it this. This is the student. All right, this is the student abstract, and this is the student. Here we can define, for example, class grad student. Inherits. I will select the simplest inheritance, which is public, from student. What does that mean? That means this new class will take all the features and methods in the student and add to them another thing, which is the, for example, integer remaining. Hours. Okay, very well. Now, when I declare the graduating student, I should send the remaining hours in the. But here I have only ID, name, and other information. So I need to create a new constructor, which is grad student of what? Integer ID, string name, string initialization, double, I think, yeah, we have double GPA, and integer remaining hour. So this is better to make it GPA small. All right, but if you can see that ID, name, specialization, and GPA are not, they do not belong to directly to the graduating students. They belong to what? They belong to the student. So I will call the student and pass this argument to the students. All of them are not our own now, okay? And the left one is the remaining hour. All right, here I don't want to the types. That's why we got it wrong. Or we got error. Right? I'll just pass them there. What's left is the remaining hours. So here I have we called it remaining HRS equals to what? RH. That's it. Okay. So let's define it here. If I define, for example, grad student of 999, just to differentiate between, then it will ask for the name. Okay. It will ask for the specialization. It also will ask about the GPA. And finally, the remaining hours, 15 hours. Okay. I can, for example, now graduating students, but here first I have to declare. Okay. Okay. Now I can use it. gs.c print info and gs.honor list. By the way, there will be a quiz in a few minutes, a few seconds. So that's why I'm trying to reach a milestone. I have errors here. I know where the errors are. Semicolon here. Okay, so as you can see, the first student and the second student here is graduating, although he or the student has another attribute which is not shown here. We will see how to override and overload this. I'll stop here because you have now a quiz. I want you to answer it, and as I told you, this will be shared with you when we finish, and it's already shared. This PDF file already shared with you. We'll continue next lecture for sure, but now I want you to take the quiz. Please do it yourself and try to practice these things. It's not a difficult assignment or quiz. So take your time. The quiz will close at 11:30. Closed. All right. It means closed, not stop accepting responses, or you can submit late or anything. It will be closed. So try to utilize the time, and all the best. I'll stop recording to avoid having lengthy recordings.